Well, hi. I'm trying to do a bit of a unique video, which is unscripted and a bit more experimental, so I hope you guys like it. I'm going to have my dumbass ranting about competitive Pokémon. I'm gonna be ranking the singles formats that I play and saying which ones do I like, which ones I don't like, so on and so forth. I'm going to go worst to best, and just remember, like, this is my personal opinion. So without further ado, let's just get started. Oh yeah, by the way, post-recording, there's this thing I'm going to include for each generation called the Lando Mid meter. The Lando Mid meter is basically, I just hate Lander's Therian. It's like the most over-centralizing Pokemon of all time. Both singles and doubles have been put in an iron paw to this ugly genie tiger whatever thing. Just it put a stranglehold on both metas so spectacularly, and it's just like I don't like Landers. In fact, I made myself a vow that if I ever use Landers Therian, like, I'm going to quit competitive Pokemon altogether. I'm going to forfeit immediately if I get it on random battles. I never use Landers in the team builder. I built some stupid thing to just avoid using Landers but getting something similar still. And even if I do badly, so long as I don't use Lando, it's fine. So the Lando Mid meter basically tells you how much of a stranglehold Landers puts in the team builder and how comfortable I am with the metagame team building, because am I missing out too much by not using him? But on that last, we have Generation 5. I personally think that in terms of the mainline games, Black and White, Black 2, White 2 are the peak of the series. They have a great story, a lot of unique details that make them pretty great games, and overall, they're just really charming games. They have a great Pokédex, great soundtrack, great region. But when it comes to the competitive scene, it's the one I like the least. A bit ironic, right? The best games have the worst meta, at least in my opinion. But I have enjoyment time to time in every single metagame, and Gen 5 is no exception. There's times I enjoy the format, but most of the time I am not a big fan, because the power creep of Generation 5 is like the most insane out of everything that is in Scarlet and Violet. There's permanent weather, and even though we don't have Chlorophyll or Swift Swim or Sand Rush Excadrill, and Slush Rush wasn't invented yet, but Bertic would have been a problem with it anyways. Yeah, even with all those bans, Gen 5 isn't really fun for me, because permanent weather isn't super fun with sand and rain being so prominent. Sun barely has anything to stand out to it. Then hail is also pretty annoying if you don't have the right team. And then just some of the dominant Pokemon there are just really annoying, like Rhinoculus and Alakazam. It's really hard to deal with them. And right now we also have the resurgence of stall teams with Clefable pulling a Gen 4, and you know what, bitches, I'm really good. And now we have a point where both stall and offense are so overblown, and it just gets annoying to play. There's also Latios, who is like a strong Pokemon, fundamentally great Pokemon, but a bit of a prick in here. And I'm just not the greatest fan of dealing with Latios in Gen 5, not the greatest fan of Alakazam or Reuniclus either. The Psychics overall here are just not super fun. But if you like Gen 5, I'm not saying that your metagame sucks. It's just not for me. That's everything. Moving on, then the next one is Gen 2, and I am not a fan of Gen 2 either. For anyone saying that Gen 2 is a stall generation, on one hand, yes, everything is maxed out in bulk and everything, but on the other hand, you're lying to yourself. Often, since Gen 2 has exploded in popularity recently, there's a lot of Machamp, Nidoking, Gengar, explosion spam going around, and the meta is actually quite fast-paced recently. We have had the rise of Pokemon like Alakazam and Jolteon merely because they make the game quicker, with things like Alakazam just being a disruptive brick and Jolteon with agility past chains to Marowak and stuff. And we also have the Snorlax. Gen 2 Snorlax is a bit of a beautiful Pokemon because it's so customizable, it helps your team so much. It's the #1 Pokemon without a doubt, a bit oppressive sometimes, but it actually is quite healthy. It keeps the tiers in stability, because as much as it's a wall itself, it's a wall breaker too, with Curse or Belly Drum, and its great bulk. It keeps the metagame in check, and it also prevents like Zapdos from completely mauling everything. But I'm not a big fan of Gen 2 in general. It can be a bit slow-paced even with all the offense blowing around. And I don't know, man, it's just Gen 2 isn't really something I am into. But let's just move on to the next one. I am not super big fan of this generation. And the next is Generation 4. And Gen 4 I have a bit of a controversial story with. In general, Diamond and Pearl I consider the worst games in the series. And Generation 4 is a format that at the same time I think it's the worst one, at the same time I think it's really underrated and pretty cool. Like, it's a bit of an enigma. How can a metagame be mediocre and amazing at the same time? It's just, this game is such a roller coaster of emotions, and it's kind of charming. I just like wish, for example, that flinch moves were dealt with, like Jirachi without Iron Head, Gyarados using Aqua Tail instead of Waterfall. That would be quite better, because it creates a bit of not being very pleased with dealing with these threats, or however you say it. It's just really annoying. And on top of that, you also have like an insane item variety, set variety on everything in the tier, that knowing what you're trying to check, it just gets annoying. Because, oh, Jirachi, I have a Heatran, I walled the infamous Body Slammer and headset. Yes, but what if that's a Calm Mind Jirachi with Empire Ground? Ever thought of that, Hook? Ever thought of that? And what if that Empoleon isn't like trying to set up an agility but is special defensive, and oh no, it knocked off my thing? And then there's Gyarados. Like, how many items does this thing have? How many movesets it has? It's just the variety in here. It makes it like fun sometimes, because you can snipe something, but you don't want to be on the receiving end of the assault. You really don't. And lately there's also Breloom, who like has raised the discussion of banning sleep in Gen 4, because Spore has been a bit of a big issue to deal with lately. And yeah, honestly, I agree with them. Breloom is a good breaker for the meta, but Spore just makes it a bit over the top. Even Breloom checks can't deal with Breloom effectively, just because they have to slot in Sleep Talk when they don't really want to, and we don't want to recur to stuff like physically defensive hunch road just to deal with Breloom. It's just a bit absurd. Oh, my favorite games are not very high. Generation 7. Generation 7 is also like defense and stall, offense and stall are equally overblown with the amount of things of the bullshit they can throw your way. But it's a bit of a fun format. This is where we're starting to go into, yeah, this place is actually not so bad. I can have fun. We have the Tapus with their terrains. Outside of being fundamentally great Pokemon, their terrains also have like disruption for terrains, and some terrains you can build around, like Tapu Bulu and Heatran. Speaking of Heatran, that guy is a bit of a bastard with all those C moves around. And this is the birth of Toxapex. I hate Toxapex. We all do. And yeah, there's also Mega Charizard Y, my favorite nuke button. And there's the Lati twins on their Mega Evolutions, which are pretty cool. I like the Mega Latis. They don't change much, but they change enough to where like, yeah, they're cool. And Superior is a pretty great presence in here too. I like Superior in Gen 6 and 7. It's annoying to be dealing with it, but at the same time it's like such team glue, and I like Superior, so it's a good place for me. And this is the last place we had Megas, and there's also C moves. I think both are really cool and complementary. Mega Evolutions are a great mechanic, glad it's back for CA and stuff. And then we also have the C moves, which on my opinion are like the weakest mechanic, but they're still a great tool for making the game more interesting, because they can help with either setup being easier or more potent, or to nuke something that otherwise would be super annoying, like Greninja, prodding Greninja using C-Dig just because Toxapex is such an asshole. And based Greninja, I also fucking despise Toxapex. And yeah, we can move on to Generation 1. I'm actually planning to release a review of RBY and the rest of the game soon. And Generation 1, it's a bit of a pretty special game that I have a bit of a soft spot on, and most of that soft spot comes from this meta. There's no hazards, there's barely any recovery, but it's fun. That uniqueness, that little limited thing, it's a very set in stone metagame. Like, there's not much that can be like revolutionized. You always have the big three and 3 Pokemon in the system, but lately there's teams that drop Chansey for another offensive threat, and yeah, that's cool. And there's also been more innovations lately, like Lead Zapdos. But it's a very straightforward metagame, there's a lot of cheese thanks to the crit mechanics, and Freeze it's essentially being a KO, and Paralysis is so unforgiving in Gen 1, you have no idea. But it's a pretty fun metagame from time to time, and it's very unique. And I overall just kind of like Gen 1 OU. Next up is Gen 9. Oh boy, Gen 9, do I have things to say about it. On one hand, it's one of the formats I play the most. It is partly because it's the most recent gen, and it's partly because I think it's a fundamentally fun format despite the power creep. There's good opportunities for balance, there's good opportunities for offense, stall. With Terra, stall is actually a bit healthier now because they nerfed recovery moves, and there's also the 255 wish glitch that makes it so that Alomomola isn't going to keep the games going for over 200 turns forever. But there's also these things that make the metagame not fun to play. Kyurem, it's so hard to deal with it. It has so much variety. It's a very annoying presence. Every time you face it, there's a sigh. Like, why am I facing this? It's not fun. Wellspring Overpun is more straightforward, it's weak to hazards, but it hits so hard. It's hard to like stop the stab combination plus knockoff or play rough or U-turn, especially if it has sword stance. Sorry for that curve. And then there's Gliscor, the rare case of a defensive Pokemon being such an asshole. Gliscor is my favorite Pokemon, but it's not fun to play against in Generation 9. Like, Ice Beam Dragonite is being used solely because Gliscor is such a nuisance. Like, this is, at this point, is some Mega Sableye level of annoyance. Samacenta is running Ice Fang because of Gliscor. Great Tusk is forced to run Ice Spinner on every single set because otherwise it's a sitting duck for Gliscor. Gliscor is like so annoying even though it doesn't have a roof. And there's also Terra Blast, which could balance out some Pokemon like the banned Volcarona. If Terra Blast was banned, it could return, and a lot of the complaints people have with Dragonite would completely disappear. Maybe Roaring Moon could return, but I am not in favor of Roaring Moon returning if Terra Blast is axed. But overall, I think Gen 9 is like a format with a lot of potential, but it just misses out on the top 3 because there's just a lot of bullshit lately that makes the format like such a slouch sometimes. Then we have Generation 6. I like Generation 6, or as overused. It's like Generation 7, but more vanilla, more balanced, if you get what I mean. I like balanced formats. There's some more emphasis in team building than there is in, oh, just nuke things with big button that goes kaboom, haha, I'll do win. And despite the thing that people say that Omega's overpowered, they also support you nicely. Like, there's definitely some really strong Megas like Metagross, Tyranitar, Charizard Y, Charizard X, but there's also Megas that contribute both offensively and defensively, like Venusaur or Scizor, and that's pretty cool. Also, Cofagrigus is viable. That's a huge win. And usually Gen 6 and X and Y are not games I'm super fond of. Auras, I think, are the best remakes. And I'm glad that I enjoy the competitive scene so much. Like, I don't play Gen 6 frequently, but whenever I do, it's a pretty fun format. You should check out Auras Overused. It's not like the greatest wonder, but me personally, I enjoy it. I love formats with balance, like the spinner spikes, but it's not going at a snail's pace. Auras is definitely one of them, and I like that. Next up, we have Generation 8. Like, Generation 8 Sword and Shield are very controversial games. I think that they're overhated, but yeah, they missed the mark on a lot of stuff. The competitive scene, yeah, it started out agonizing. Dynamax. It's such a terribly overpowered mechanic that it's banned from even Ubers. Getting banned from Ubers is such a feat for a mechanic that's usually reserved for things like Mega Rayquaza, but Mega Rayquaza is like a mechanic technically, but at the same time not really. Dynamax as a whole is something everything gets, but it's so fundamentally overpowered. Thank God it's banned. I don't want to deal with Gyarados doing sweeps from time to time and everything using Ditto. And above that, Gen 8, after all those bans it's had to go through over the lifespan, now it's looked back fondly as a pretty great format pretty balanced. There's a lot of team building emphasis here, more wit than there is like auto win, and it's part of like why I put Gen 9 so high, because Gen 8 is basically Gen 9 after all those balancing, all those overwhelming threats now gone. If Gen 9 can get rid of like Hiram, Wellspring, this could beat its destiny. It could potentially be a better than Gen 8, or Gen 8 could still be better, because Gen 8 is basically the most vanilla competitive Pokemon experience. There's no flashy mechanics, just the core mechanics, and your wit, just do your stuff. And it's also the birth of Galarian Slowking. I love Galarian Slowking. It's one of the best pivots in the whole game. And I like regenerator pivots that are like good for the structure of the team, but not completely passive, so that they can be slotted on other playstyles. Yeah, I like Gen 8. It's a pretty cool format, despite everything people say about the generation. If we got a competitive format this good, I wouldn't want to delete those games, because I really don't want any other format that isn't Gen 8 if we are going to get games this mediocre. Like, it's a saving grace, if you get what I mean. Because, yeah, those Sword and Shield aren't the greatest, but I love playing this, and there's also sometimes a bit of, like, a sigh you let with some of the things here, like Melmetal. It's not fun to fight Melmetal, but it's still like, there's stuff in here that is fundamentally solid, but everything else you can get by, just play well. And yeah, Gen 8 is pretty cool. Now for my favorite format, we have Generation 3. There's no physical special split, there's barely any items besides like Choice Band, no Choice Packs either, leftovers, and some pinch berries, no resist berries even. Oh, this is so limited, and why is it so good? Well, because it's similar to Gen 8 in such a vanilla format, but the lack of physical special split creates some unique opportunities. Like Gengar, that thing is like, Gen 3 Gengar can do everything for you. It can be your wall, it can be your win condition, it can be your trade Pokemon, your bulky pivot, your spin blocker. It can cook you dinner, it can take the dog for a walk, it can clean off your garden, it can be your wife. Gen 3 Gengar is like, can do so much. It can be EV'd to survive a Tyranitar pursuit. Oh yeah, Tyranitar. Tyranitar is like at its most versatile in Generation 3. In other gens is like more min-maxed, always like physical dark stab and stuff. But here, you have to really play around with the moveset, with whatever you like. There's Mixed Tyranitar, Dragon Dance, Mixed Dragon Dance, Pursuit. It's a really fun Pokemon, Gen 3 Tyranitar, and it's Sand. It makes it so the game isn't as stall-fest, because there's a lot of Blissey and Suicune that otherwise would be pretty hard to answer. Tyranitar is doing everyone a favor with Sandstorm, because it speeds up the game. And even with like Sand and stuff, Blissey is really effective. Suicune with the Rest Talk set is a bit of a, if you let it go, the game is over. There's also Metagross with its cheese with Meteor Mash. It can just snowball the game for no reason. Or it can just do nothing because of the miss. There's a lot of RNG here too. Every single generation has it, the negatives. But overall, I really like how fundamentally solid Gen 3 is. It's similar to Gen 8. It's mostly you, the team builder, your wit, your skill. A lot of people are trying some gimmicky strats, and I mean, yeah, Gen 3 rewards a lot of creativity, but it also means that people just want to stay away from playing the meta like using the good stuff, because now I want to like start a resurgence. I want to make this Pokemon rise and stuff. Bro, that's not how it works. The metagame is set in there. There's viability rankings for a reason. Yeah, but anyways, I think Gen 3 is like probably the peak of competitive Pokemon in singles, because everything has a niche, almost everything has a niche, and it's overall a pretty fun format. The most popular old generation for a reason, because it's great. Despite all the years that have gone by, Gen 3 Overused is like one of the best formats out there to play on Smogon. I have different opinions from the games it resides from, but the Emerald review will come in way later down the line. But anyways, these have been my ranking on the competitive formats that I play on singles. So I really hope you enjoyed it, and like if you like this kind of content, just me unscripted rambling, ranting, consider like supporting the video. And yeah,